there is something to be said in terms of one-to-one relationship development that happens in January. The hand delivery of an impact report, walking through with a donor exactly what they made possible, not strictly so that you can make another ask here and then.
No.
This is about building into a relationship over time because they're committed to the cause because they've given at that level.
Welcome to Cause and Effect, a podcast brought to you by the Dunham Podcast Network.
Here, we will provide a fresh voice that breaks down the most recent leadership lessons, fundraising trends, and the ups and downs within the nonprofit industry.
And our goal? Increasing your effectiveness for more impact.
Welcome to this episode. I'm Trent Dunham, the president and CEO of Dunham+Company. We're excited to have you with us today. We're talking about, actually, first I should introduce our guest, Josh Crowther. Josh is VP at Dunham+Company. Maybe give our listeners and viewers a little bit of background on yourself, because you sound weird.
I do sound different. I like to say different. So I actually started at Dunham+Company 17 years ago. I met your dad in a little shopping mall in Sydney, Australia, and weirdly, Rick decided to plant the second Dunham+Company office in Sydney, of all places.
Yeah.
I was in finance at the time and was experiencing the GFC, so the housing bubble, and I had to hand manila folders to investors saying, sorry guys, you're going to have to wait another 10 years to retire. And watching that all play out, I decided that I wanted to get out of that game, which is probably unsurprising. And so I met Rick, and he handed me his book, If God to Provide, Why We Have to Ask for Money. I read that book not knowing that I wanted to do this for my life. And after I finished that book, I thought, man, you can do that for ministries, for a living. I'm on board. So started in account service, worked with a bunch of great ministries globally. And then you invited me a couple of years ago to move up here to the US. And so I've been here with my family almost 3 years.
It's crazy.
So yeah, 2.5 years now.
That went fast.
Yeah, it went super fast. And have been helping really more ministries at larger scales do more ministry work. And I love that. The strategic for me is where I come alive. And if you've ever heard me speak before about numbers, you know they're my passion. I love numbers.
It's just amazing. It gets all of us going, Josh. But today our particular topic is starting well in 2026. So hey, it's January. We made it through year end. So just a filter for what our conversation is around today. It's you're running an organization, you're leading a ministry of some kind, a church, a parachurch organization. You've just got done with year end. Whether that ended well for you or not, TBD. I don't know. Maybe it did.
You're probably
maybe
still rapping.
Yeah,
Right.
You're probably still counting numbers. But as you're doing that, we have to pivot. Hopefully you've already pivoted to 2026, to the new year. What is it going to take from us from a communication standpoint, a fundraising standpoint, a branding standpoint, a media standpoint? What do we have to do to be successful, to set us up well for the new year, to be successful in 2026? And so I've got a couple of principles we just want to talk through today. Josh and I want to talk through that hopefully will help you give consideration towards how you engage with the audiences that your ministry has been given, how you communicate well, how you give opportunities to engage at the deepest level at which the constituents want to engage with the organization, whether that's financially or volunteer, prayer, whatever that looks like. And so I think it's important for us to just start with macro principles and maybe myth busting, if this was a myth busting episode of the Cause and Effect podcast. The main myth that I hear, and I know you hear it too, the thing that we hear too often is, let's go light on our communications in January because my donors, our constituents, they need a break. Mm-hmm. And I'm here to tell you today that is false. That is not a true thing. That is not a true statement. That we call that in our world an excuse, a reason to give yourself a break.
Right. I'm tired, I think is really what you're saying. Yeah. Donor fatigue is often used as this catch-all for, the team's tired. We really don't want to put the effort in to put out relevant communication. So we're going to blame the donors and call it donor fatigue. The reality is they're not tired of doing great work in the world. You may be tired, and that's okay. We've got to acknowledge there's an emotional strain of year-end. That for sure, I get. That's a tough mindset to come out of. But I think you have to realize that donors love relevant communication. Every month of the year, they love it.
Yep. Yeah, and I think what we have to embrace a couple principles around how we approach communication in January and how our constituents are prepared to receive communication from us. I think first of all, I think donor fatigue is not actually a real thing. It usually means poor communication. You haven't done a good job communicating, and you don't have a strategy of how you're going to approach those donors. In January in particular, there's something that happens with the donor mindset, really all of our mindsets. If you think about it, when you cross New Year's Day, personally, you're thinking about everything that's ahead of you for the year. Mm-hmm. So it's like, how do I set new rhythms? How do I recommit to certain things that I value in my life? But also, how do I start new habits or implement new things in my life that are going to make me more well-rounded or keep me closer to God or whatever the thing is that I want to achieve in the new year. And in a similar way, we see basically donors reset. Like at year end, it's about a year end activity, a gift or whatever. But when the calendar turns to January 2nd, after I've watched all my bowl games and eaten all my food, the reality is almost that donor mindset resets almost immediately. Talk a little bit about, from your perspective, what are things that we should be either careful of, or why should we be emboldened, and what should we do as an organization when we communicate to our donors in January?
Yeah, I think putting that mentality first, of knowing, just like you, they're heading into a new year and have goals and ambitions themselves, and therefore speak vision to that. Because at the end of the day, they're likely way more open to hearing about what they can do in the world. Now, we got to also appreciate it is seasonal. So year ends just happened. There was a big push. So likely your communication is going to look different than it did in December. Yeah. You're likely not going to have 3 emails on one day saying give today.
Right.
Now, I have worked with some organizations where in reality they did come out of year end with a gap. And if that's truly your situation where you still have a funding gap to meet, donors are still open and aware of that, and they will appreciate open and transparent communication. In fact, for one organization, they had their best January ever when they missed their goal, because guess what? They communicated effectively to their donors, and their donors were super generous in January where they'd never been before. Again, where there's a rationale and a reason to do that makes sense. But also be aware, this is a vision-setting time. It's going to set the tone for the rest of the year. So if you can pull the donors' eyes up to see, here's where the ministry is headed and your role in it, January is a great time for that. So really, I start with vision in January. Yeah. It's such a good time for that. And then work out, how do you connect the dots with the supporters that are with you? How do you connect the dots to their personal involvement and the achievement of that mission? So don't make it about the organization. Yep. We as an organization are doing this great thing. That's why you need to get on board. No, you can do this year. And that's how I would direct things in January.
Good. Which really moves quickly to one of my other points, which is January needs to be a time in the communication calendar where, yes, setting vision for the year, but you already need to be thinking about how is that vision then going to be impacted through the rest of the year. So a January letter or a January communication that helps paint the macro goals for the year, the objectives, where are we headed, what are we excited about that we came out of the previous year that we're building upon. And don't feel the need or pressure to, write a 5-page letter on that. But at a macro level, giving the vision, as you said, towards where we're headed, and then spend the rest of the year unpacking that vision.
Yeah.
Because most likely your organization, your ministry, your church is doing 100 different things, right, to accomplish the overarching goal. But you can't tell everyone all those 100 things in one sitting. They can't. There's no possible way that they can consume all that and understand how it all fits together. So the goal is then to come back and even map that out for the rest of the year. How are we unpacking how we're achieving that vision in different ways throughout the rest of this year. And maybe putting key landmarks. Hey, these are the 3 or 4 pillars we have in our organization. We want to make sure we give robust opportunity for people to understand that and give towards those campaigns. And so maybe setting those out throughout the year, even in January, so that you have destinations you're making for. And it's not just what random thing are we going to talk about in March, right?
Yeah, and that's so good in terms of starting with, like, this is what you believe about the world as a donor, and we do too. We believe something big about the world, and here are the specific ways in which we're going to help achieve that together. And I think the specific ways then are unpacked through the rest of the year. So you may have something coming in March. There may be something you do over summer every year that you want to highlight in January, and it comes under that banner. And then there may be something further in the year that you unpack. But I think that the point is that you're pointing to the impact which only happens through their support. That only happens through their support. So highlighting that for them and starting with the why is the best way to do that, because they are with you for a reason, because they believe something about the world, and you help them fulfill that.
Yeah.
So ultimately, in that vein of New Year's resolutions, how do we tap into what they believe in about the world, and how specifically partnering with what you're doing in the world will help achieve that, whatever it is that they believe.
Most of the time, churches do a worse job than parachurch organizations in kind of giving rationale related to the things that the ministry is accomplishing. But I actually think in this setting, churches do a better job than parachurch organizations.
Agreed.
Typically in casting a vision for the year. They have a Vision Sunday. They have some kind of launch to the year. It's more naturally built into the life of a church. And so if you're a church and you're not doing that, I think you need to consider how are you helping set the tone for the year for your people. But take advantage of that, and then think more intentionally about how that gets unpacked throughout the rest of the year if you're a church. To that end, I think it's important not just to think about, don't be afraid to ask for $1 in January. I mean, again, the ministry, the donor mindset has reset. And if there is a strong rationale, there is a thing in DC at the end of every January called the March for Life. And so a lot of the pregnancy centers that we work with, a lot of the churches we work with recognize and celebrate Sanctity of Life Sunday. That's in January. Guess what? All the donors are very excited to give to Sanctity of Life Sunday. And so we're not making the decision for the donor on when they are ready to give or not. But we can be, like you said, measured in the way that we communicate that opportunity. It's going to feel different than year end. But I think another main thing that I would encourage you to think through is not just giving in January. That's great. It may or may not be appropriate based on what your communication cycle is, or the degree to which you ask. But think about engaging your constituents. It's a great time because of the things we've already articulated about how people view a new year and the disposition with which they come to a new year, for you to engage people around content. And let me give you a couple of examples. What would it might look like to engage our constituents in something that would be helpful to them that our particular organization could help facilitate? So one organization we work with, they'll do a 21-day prayer campaign to start the year. And so it's a series of email devotionals that come to you every day for 21 days that lead up to a particular event or a particular goal, or and what I mean goal is like our goal is this year to be better of equipping our pastors around the world. And so we're going to be praying for 21 days that the local equipping of the church would happen, whatever it is. What does that 21-day campaign look like for you? Man, 21 days is random.
Could be 7.
Could be 7. Could be 3. I don't know. But is it in the church? A lot of times I know we work with a church in Colorado that does basically like a prayer and fasting season at the beginning of the year that is genuinely reflective of the core of who they are as a church. And that has become such an important part of the life of the body of that entity. What is it for your organization that is rallying people around the cause, but in a way that they are engaging with that is related to their spiritual disciplines. Have you seen anything like that particularly work in the context in which you have led?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the note on spiritual disciplines is a really good one, because I think as faith-based organizations, you have this whole toolkit that others don't, in that you can encourage them to take timeless practices like prayer and fasting, those things we know are going to be good not only for the mental state, but also the spiritual state of our constituents, those who consume our content, those who engage with our nonprofits. So I would say that some of the best ones have been around those spiritual disciplines, the 7-day prayer series, and the intentional call out with that being start a new habit this year. So kind of you know that there are billions of dollars being spent on New Year's resolutions from every marketing firm across the United States and the world. So there is a season to these things. Now, we also know that we have a depth of resource we can tap into that's not billions of dollars likely. It's not going to be that. But we can absolutely use the momentum that comes from a season like January with New Year's resolutions. And we can call out the truth of what it means to engage in these practices, whether that truth is engaged with prayer or fasting or Bible reading is a great one. Many people are going to have resolution. I want to get into God's word more.
Yeah.
How do we equip our people? And I have seen this work really well.
Yeah.
If understanding the Bible in 7 days so I can read it for myself. So a simple thing like that. Or, we have one organization that's a Bible in a year, and it works fantastically every January, because guess what? People are ready to engage with God's word because they've made a resolution in themselves. They believe a thing. That thing is, I need to engage in God's word more because it's going to change my life. How do we put a proposition in front of them that says, we can help you do exactly that?
Yeah.
I think those things have all worked incredibly well. And you're right on the engagement side. The engagement levels we get with those types of things, it's really tough to do it in the thick of year end. That's not something you want to do in December. In January, once your eyes are looking up, that's absolutely something. And we see, it's a lot lower cost for acquisition. And I will say this as a call out to this year and looking forward, we know because of some tax changes that we're likely to see more donor engagement. But where does donor engagement start? With new donors. It starts with engaging them with content. It starts with engaging them with some sort of activity, action, volunteering, or participation. So if we can get out of the gate strong and spend some budget on engaging these audiences, that sets us up really well for the rest of the year for seeing people who have been on the sidelines of giving get on board and start giving.
Yeah, that's good. And that's really the other point I want to make with the early part of the year is you front load some of your acquisition campaigns to the front of the year so that you have time for those people to marinate, for lack of a better term, in the communications, in awareness of the organization, a deepening of understanding throughout the year, so that when the next year end comes around, those people have been with you for 8, 10, 12 months versus 1 or 2. If you
the percentage difference in the engaged audience giving from month 1 versus month 12 is massive. It's like 7-fold increase in donor conversion of that group who's been engaged. So 12 months, you absolutely want 12 months. So if you've got budget to spend on any sort of engagement activity, like Q1, don't wait till Q2 or 3 when you think I'm going to yield a better result. No, the earlier you pull that, for sure, you're going to see the yield at year end because of that activity you've done.
That's absolutely right. So thinking kind of just to restate, how as an organization am I engaging our constituents? How am I giving them opportunity to be ministered to be edified, to be encouraged in their walk, to be equipped? And how am I speaking to a seasonality that exists whether I want it to or not? That's a great way to help position the organization as the advocate for the donor. We exist to help equip you, not just the people that we're doing programmatic ministry to. So I think that's one principle. The other principle is don't be afraid to ask. Certainly people are ready and willing to give. It's not the excuse that they just finished year end doesn't exist. That's not real. So don't make that excuse.
People get paid every month. I mean, this is most get paid every month. So they're making decisions of where they're going to give. Yeah. Likely, if they're stewards, they're not thinking, oh, I'm a bit tired from year-end giving, because they're probably still in the glow of year-end giving. I did all this amazing work.
Yeah.
That glow moves into January, and get another paycheck. It lands mid-month, maybe January. They're making a decision of what they're going to do, how their priorities have shifted in the year. So if you can land something now, that's going to work really well.
Yeah. So then the third principle is to cast a vision for the year that people can come alongside and you can unpack through the end of the year. I think that's really important too, because you're taking people on a journey. And I think the final thing that I would say is, for all the different bands within your organization, the different segments of audience that you have. So maybe there are people who are just consuming content, and that's the deepest they're going to go. Maybe it's people who've given an occasional donation. Maybe it's people who have a monthly donation to you. Maybe it's people that have given you a significant gift. How are you setting up that relationship in January and February for the totality of the year? How are you looking at that communication cycle at the different levels of donor engagement? Not because they're more valuable or anything like that, but because you want to sow into that relationship. They're not a glorified ATM machine. You have to see as a ministry, part of your ministry is to those people who are engaged financially or otherwise with the organization. Yes, to help make the ministry happen, but part of our responsibility is to shepherd those people in that, equip them, give them the information needed to understand how the ministry is succeeding because of them, and then equip them to be excited about whenever that next opportunity does come to engage financially. What are some 2 or 3 recommendations you might have as to how we kind of set that tone and then walk that through, beginning in the first quarter and walking it through the rest of the year?
Yeah, it's really good. And we mentioned one in terms of that vision letter. The thing that really does unpack at a high level. That's one great tool in the toolkit we have. The second thing, and I will say, depending on your standard rhythm, is impact reports or impact reporting is really important at that time, because really, if you're asking them to step in deeper, we've really got to answer the question, will have my gifts made a difference? Particularly thinking of those occasional donors, some of those monthly donors, and those giving significant amounts. Mm-hmm. On the significant amount level, impact reporting is essential. I would say for your monthly donors, it's a really nice to have, and you really should invest in it. And even for occasional donors, even if you simplify and go down to a 4 or 6 page impact report, that it's still got to communicate, hey, when you gave, it had this impact. So tying it in and saying, that was a great decision that you made, and here are some on-ramps for deeper engagement with that. I'd say the other thing, and again, depending on the type of organization that you are, challenging people to deepen their level of financial engagement too. So that could look like an occasional donor being encouraged to consider a monthly gift, because at the start of the year, again, that's where habits are forming, habits are changing. So if that works for your organization and it does make sense, then considering starting that journey, moving people from occasional giving to recurring giving. There's also, for some organizations, it's relevant where they can invite people to think about the level that they're giving regularly. And for churches, that's the same challenge at a Vision Sunday, at the start of the year. Like, how are you committing to this community and the impact that this community has, and consider increasing that commitment to this community that you're a part of. In the same way, for a nonprofit organization, it's increasing your commitment, knowing that the impact you had has been phenomenal and will continue to increase. And then I think there is something to be said in terms of one-to-one relationship development that happens in January. The hand delivery of an impact report, walking through with a donor exactly what they made possible, not strictly so that you can make another ask here and then.
No.
This is about building into a relationship over time, because they're committed to the cause because they've given at that level.
That's right.
So it's making sure we close the loop on that and building up to multi-year commitments then, and starting that with, hey, this commitment you made last year has made all of this difference. And so getting that time one-on-one with those donors that are critical for your success is really important.
Yeah, as a church, if you're thinking about new rhythms in life and how you can lead your people, and it's a great time to ask for people to commit to volunteering for a certain area, children's ministry, or how can I serve at the food kitchen that we have, or the different things that the church is doing. It's a good time for them to present those opportunities for people to make decisions on how they can deepen their engagement from a volunteer perspective in the organization as well. I would just encourage you to consider that as well. So those are kind of all external points. They're like, how do we position ourselves for success with the constituents we're ministering to and that are helping make the mission of our organization a reality in the field or on the street, or however we do that? I would just say one thing towards leaders of organizations, if you're leading an organization, or if you're leading a team within an organization, is it's really important in January to focus on goal setting. Like, are you giving your people tangible ways in which we can measure their success over what they have been given the purview over? I think bereft of that, it's harder to not just hold someone accountable, but to help equip people towards what their goals are if those are undefined. So thinking about 4 teams, hey, marketing team, hey, ministry team, hey, whatever team, these are the goals and objectives for this year that we have set up as an organization for you to achieve. That can be collaborative in nature, or it can be directive in nature. That's dependent upon your leadership style and the style of the organization. But also, it helps those teams understand how they are being measured and then how they're contributing to the overall success of the organization, whether the growth of that, the health of that. And then individually, hey, this is the team goal, this is the individual goal that I'm assigning to you as a leader of that team, so that we can work collectively together to make that a reality. I think that there's such value in doing that we oftentimes just kind of pass over.
Yeah, because we get focused on the outside drivers. What drives our success from the outside, when in reality we have a team which steers the ship.
Yep.
And I would say the key here is that same vision that you're going to communicate externally, make sure you do communicate that internally. Like, here's the vision and your part in it, which you're talking to right there with, like, here are your specific goals this year. And invite conversations. This is and Trent, you've talked multiple times about listening well. Invite conversations. If that's our vision and we're going to achieve that by you doing this very specific thing, your part in that, where are the gaps?
Yeah.
Like, I want to know how, as a leader, I can equip you, fill whatever gap there is there. So invite conversations, ask good questions. If we're going to achieve this vision, like, put that big thing on the table and say, all right, and here are each of your roles in achieving that. Like, tell me what's missing.
Yeah.
Tell me what's broken. Tell me what's confusing here. And we'll bring clarity to it. And at the start of the year, that's a great time for your own team, because what it does is injects new energy and ownership from every part of the organization.
Yeah.
If you can achieve that, if you can put the vision on the table and people take their section and own it together with their colleagues around the table, then that's going to lead to success. Much, I would say, more than just putting the vision on the wall. And saying, okay, everyone, we're going to go do that. Having the intentional conversation is like, how are we not achieving that right now?
Yeah.
Where are the gaps right now?
That's good.
What do we need to fill right now? And starting in January means you have time to actually implement.
Right.
So you're not like, hey, it's year end and we're all snowed. No, this is a great time. We're going to have time and intentionality to work towards those, even if it's in 90-day increments. Like, in the first 90 days, we want to achieve this towards that vision. In the second 90 days, over summer, into fall and right into December, here's how we're building those. And you can build those each quarter. It's a really good practice to get into.
I know we're going to go deeper into this when we're at our summit with our clients and friends in really today and tomorrow, the next day at Summit, as this podcast drops. But maybe just give our listeners and viewers a snippet, your highest level thoughts on what's it going to be like in 2026 for the donor community. You mentioned already in passing the tax code changes is probably going to encourage people to be more engaged philanthropically. Anything else that you would call to the forefront for people as they think about, is this going to be as hard as it has been the last few years?
There's macro trends. The economy is a big factor, and of course, consumer confidence is pretty much always tied to donor confidence. Like, if we're speaking to people who are willing to spend money, that's going to look different than those who are pulling back and saving. The things that will enable more donor acquisition, I mentioned the tax changes. You can now claim above the line, including all of those. Like 90% of Americans claim the standard deduction. For 90% of Americans, they now get to claim their giving over and above that, up to $1,000 individually and $2,000 as a couple. So that now brings way more people back into the game. Right now, they estimate about 43% household engagement with philanthropy in the U.S.
Yeah.
That's dropped from like 60+% just in 2008.
Yeah.
So like that's a big drop.
Yep.
However, again, some of these policies they'll take time to build out. But I would say again, your early investment now in engaging new constituents will yield those dividends as this plays out, and even into 27, we'll see that continue to play out. But if I'm looking at the very highest level, there are some other interesting things going on. So again, going back to the tax changes, you got like a 35% cap. So there are going to be some challenges for donors who are giving away 99% of their wealth, which I know some are trying to, because they can only claim the 35%. So it may have some impact on the big end of town. But I'd say that's the great thing is you can challenge people to say, like, it's your involvement, your investment today, which actually makes this ministry this ministry possible. So I do think I have more confidence, honestly, coming into this year
Good.
than I have in previous years because of some of the engagement levers that have been pulled from a policy standpoint. Now, it's obviously up to every individual ministry to do the work and to continue to communicate really effectively. Now, there are other macro trends like, hey, AI is taking a bunch of jobs away. We've seen massive reductions in headcount from big tech companies. For most ministries, now I know there are some working in those companies, but it's a much smaller percentage of church-attending Christians that are typically in those large companies that are doing the large layoffs. I've looked at some numbers on that, and I think we're okay for now. But the reality is people lose jobs.
Yep.
And there will be more of that this year. And so we've got to be aware that when we're talking to our constituents, they may be in all sorts of different situations. But there are also going to be those who are benefiting greatly from some of these technological advances and who are doing more business than ever before, that are doing very well financially, and effectively challenging them to step forward where others have to step back due to job losses, et cetera. We can point to those things as realities. So for me, I'm an optimistic guy. So I'll start there. I'm optimistic, and I'm most optimistic about a broader base of people getting engaged. If we do the work in engaging their hearts, the money will come. Because now there's new incentive to do that.
That's good. It's good. I love that. I love that being the place where we end this conversation, because it is, I agree with you. I think 26 is going to present opportunities for organizations to re-engage maybe some lapsed donors and to acquire some new folks that just have been on the sideline. And so I'm very bullish around that as well. Well, thank you for joining us today on the Cause and Effect podcast, Josh, and for all that you're doing in the ministries that you get to serve. And thank you for joining us on the Cause and Effect podcast. Join us again next time.
And thanks for listening to the Cause and Effect podcast, a resource developed by Dunham+Company.
We'll be back in 2 weeks with a new episode. In the meantime, do us a favor. If you like this content, subscribe, share us with a friend, leave us a review on your podcast provider, and follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Dunham+Company to help us spread the word.
Thanks again, and join us next time as we work together towards increased effectiveness for more impact.